everyone. Here's a quick video on white bread, the same recipe we use in the classroom. We're just going to do, I've already scaled out the ingredients. We're just going to talk about the mixing of the bread, sort of the 12 stages of bread making. So we're going to go over that. I'm just going to move the, actually I guess I can use the camera where it is. So I'm going to just point down and you're going to see that we have scaled the ingredients, which is the first step in the 12 stages of bread making. 1,000 grams of flour, we have 90 grams of sugar, 15 grams of yeast, 15 grams of salt. We've got 300 grams of water and 300 grams of milk. We have 1 egg, and we have, in this case I'm using margarine, and that is 120 grams. Okay, so the first stage, scaling. The second stage, mixing. So we have a large bowl. I don't know why I tilted the camera up, because I like to look at myself. You see the dog chasing the cat. So I'm going to put the dry ingredients in the bowl. We know that when we're combining the dry ingredients, we want to mix them ahead of time because we want to protect the yeast from both the salt and the sugar. Okay, so first we combine the dry ingredients. Then we combine the wet ingredients, and in this case, we have an egg. The margarine just goes in on top. So we don't have to worry about whisking the margarine in with the wet ingredients. So I'm just going to use a mixer. So what goes in first? Everyone is saying, the dry ingredients, the dry ingredients. You're right, the dry ingredients go in first. I'm just going to encourage those to not spill all over the place. So this whole stage now, all of this that's going on right now, is what? The second stage, which is mixing. Okay, I'm going to add the milk and water and egg. Delicious. And then I will scoop in the margarine in this case. We often use margarine when we're making that bread. The extra salt helps, and the softness of that fat also, it helps it actually to a slightly longer shelf life. So there we go. We use a dough hook to mix bread, which is the next step. Mixing. So we have scaling, and then we have mixing. Mix, mix, mix. After mixing, we have what's called bulk fermentation, and I will bring you back once that's happened. At school we have a proofer to do that, but what I do here is I usually just turn my oven on to 200 or whatever. I just turn it on. I'll leave it on for 5 or 10 minutes, let it get warm. Then I'll turn the light on, because the light bulb actually does generate a fair amount of heat inside the oven. And I've got a big bowl that I use for bread. Here, my brother gave me a ceramic bowl. I'll put that in the sink and fill it with hot water, and that'll warm the bowl, and that'll help also. So I'll put the dough, once it's completed mixing, and we know that it's speed 1 for 2 or 3 minutes, and then speed 2. This mixer's a little bit small for speed 2, so it'll just be speed 1 for a much longer time. And then I will put it in a warm bowl in the oven that is warm, and then that is bulk fermentation. Fermentation, yeah. Mixing, 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 mixing. All right, so we mixed and mixed and mixed. The dough is nicely holding together. It's pulled itself into a ball. I'm putting a little bit of flour on the surface. This is still a part of mixing. Nice clean bowl. And then we're just going to knead a little bit. The mixer did 90% of that. We don't need a lot of flour because this recipe's pretty good as far as accuracy. And we used a scale to measure the ingredients, which is also very accurate. Okay, so we've got scaling, mixing, and now we have bulk fermentation. So I have this big yellow bowl full of hot water. I'm just going to dry it a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of butter. And just spray the bowl. Put the dough in, flip it upside right. So the outside has some butter on it. Now, that's going to go in the oven. You can see I've got the light on, and I had it on for about 4 minutes. 5 minutes, it's really nice and warm in there. So now it's going to bulk ferment. During the fermentation process, we do something called punching and folding. Punching and folding is you're actually folding the bread. You're pushing it to let the carbon dioxide out. What are the things you're doing? Letting carbon dioxide out, and you're redistributing the yeast and the heat that's stored in the dough to try to get it evenly warm. Okay? And so the bulk fermentation process is sort of like, here to here, and then periodically during the bulk fermentation process, we punch and fold. Often when we talk about the 12 stages of bread making, we say scaling, mixing, bulk fermentation, punching, folding, and then portioning. And we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, bye. Okay, so punching and folding. This dough looks great. You can see how much bigger it is. It's nice and soft. So I'm just going to fold it. Okay, and then I'm going to put it back in the oven to ferment a little while longer, and then we'll start portioning it. All right, so here we are. We've punched and folded. Look at this beautiful soft dough. I do often say, don't mess with the dough, don't mess with it, don't let all the relaxation, you've got all this relaxed gluten, we don't want to mess around with it too much. So we've put it on our bench, so it's just fermented. So we've fermented and we've punched and folded. And now we are going to, we're scaling again, or portioning. So I'm going to make about 100 gram pieces, and they're going to be for sandwich rolls or burger buns. Chef Mac told me about this. he did a grilled portobello mushroom the other day with pesto mayonnaise, and I'm like, oh yeah, I want to make one of those. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to do a loaf of bread, and I need about 900 grams for that. Okay, so here's some examples of portioning, or it's called scaling as well. And so what we're doing is we're dividing the dough into the pieces we need for whatever it is we're making. So in this case, we're making little sandwich rolls, and I'm making a loaf. So then the dough's been cut, and we've been manipulating it. I've been really careful not to manipulate it too much. So what do we do after this? Always, after we scale, we shape. So we're going to round them. So, but they rest. Okay, so we've portioned or scaled, and now they're going to rest for a little bit. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's probably long enough because I was really careful not to stretch the gluten too much. So we've got some nice elasticity here. So we do rounding, right? That's a boule. What is the word for baker in French? Is boulanger, or boulangerie is a bakery, and that means ball maker. So we're making nice rounds of the dough. You can hear all the noise I'm making there. And that happens no matter what I'm doing. I always round first, or 99% of the time I'm rounding first. So with these, we're sort of done. So now, once they've been shaped, then they get panned. Panning, shaping and panning is the last step, basically, before you then start baking. So these are going to now do one of the last stages, which is proofing, where the yeast gives one more final push before it gets killed in the oven. Poor yeast, goodbye, la 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 la. So I'm going to set this aside over here to proof. The bread dough, that's going to be the loaf of bread, I'm going to round this as well. And then again, it's going to rest. So there are these periods of activity, mixing, scaling, and then fermentation, where you're doing things to the bread and then you're not doing things to the bread. You're doing things to the bread, you're not. So here it's rounded, and it's just going to sit and rest. Usually what happens when it's rested, if you push on it with your fingerprint doesn't bounce back. So you can see the jokes that Sophie plays on me. Creating method, the 22 steps of becoming a pirate, which she added later when I was making notes for myself, and then she adds things like bees and turpentine and a will to live. It makes fun of she said eggs, sis, because my printing isn't good enough for a grade 10 student. Okay, whatever. So there we go. That's a bit stickier, it's a bit softer. So we're just gonna fold And like I've said before, we sort of push it so it looks kind of like a mouth, and we say, shut your mouth. And we just want to make a log shape. Now, once we've rounded, we rest, then we shape this log. We really want the bottom seam to be well sealed so the bread doesn't break apart. And then it's going to go in the pan. So, proofing, let's see if I can do this. So this loaf of bread is just going to sit in this pan. So this kettle's got a little bit of water in it. It's sitting over the vent for the stove, the oven. The oven's on at 415. The rolls are just sitting underneath this damp cloth. And I will dampen a cloth and put that loaf under it as well. And then they will sit there, I don't know, for whatever, I don't know, half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. It really depends on the window's open and it's cool outside, so it's going to take a little bit longer. But I've got the oven on, so I can't really have the stuff sitting inside the oven. But you just want a place that's warm, that's draft free. So I put a pot here to kind of block the wind from the window, and I put warm water on the cloths that I wrap the bread in, and they just sit there on top of the oven, and the heat just rising up from the oven getting hot is probably enough to well, it is enough to proof that bread. So that's proofing, which is what's happening going on now. And then the next thing is going to be baking, which is not even the last step. And then there's cooling, and we will have, I have a piece of ceramic that I use just in case things drip on the table, it doesn't stain. And cooling racks. Because bread should really, especially yeast bread, that loaf of bread can't sit in that pan and cool in that loaf of pan. In that loaf pan, it'll get really soggy. So we want to get it onto one of these racks so that it can, all the air can, the moisture can kind of evaporate out of it. And same thing with those rolls. It's not as important to get them off the pan after they've been baked, but it's nice to get them onto a rack where they can sort of, where the water can evaporate out so they don't get soggy. And then once they're cooled, then it's called storage or storing. And so soft bread usually goes into a plastic bag. Crusty bread usually goes into a paper bag, because if you put crusty bread in a plastic bag, it'll get kind of chewy and the crust won't be nice and crisp. And soft buns, if you put them in a paper bag, they'll get dry and I guess more crusty, which you don't want because they're soft. All right. So, and then eating, I guess, or whatever. And I probably won't show you that, but no one needs to see that. Okay. So I'll bring you back when they're ready to go in the oven, and then when they come out of the oven, and then we'll be done. All right, so I don't know, it's probably been an hour and a half. There's our damp cloth. There's our loaf and the rolls, and so you can see the rolls are really nice and plump, and when we touch them, that fingerprint kind of stays dented in, so those are ready. That loaf is, I wouldn't mind it a little bit longer, so I'm going to leave it until I'll bake it second. These will take probably 15 or 20 minutes. These will take 15 to 20 minutes, and then the loaf will could be over an hour, so it would make sense to bake these first, because then otherwise these will overproof while waiting for the loaf to bake. So I'm going to stick these in the oven, and we'll take a look at them in a little while. Okay, I had Farley out for a walk there while where we were baking. So there's our beautiful rolls, and gonna just get them off that tray because, like I said, it's a good idea to get them off the tray. You can you probably can't see it, but there's a fair amount of steam coming off them, and that will help them to be soggy. Which, oh, you can't even see that. Sorry about that. Or maybe you could. I don't know. I can't. I wasn't looking. So those are there. I think I'll do this. All right. So those are the buns. That's weird. I can't even see. Beautiful. And there's that loaf of bread now. See how much bigger it's gotten? So that's going to go in the oven. And that will conclude this video. So cooling now. And then I'm going to put those in a plastic bag. And then that's going to get baked. And it'll get dumped out of the pan just like these are. Like I said, it'll get dumped out of the pan just like the buns. And then it'll get wrapped. So, all right. There's a nice little video after I edit it together on bread and the 12 stages of bread making. Yay. Bye.